This is the Self Storage Podcast, where we share the knowledge and skills from the industry's leading investors, developers, and operators to help you launch and grow your self-storage business. I'm your host, Scott Myers, and over the past 16 years, we have acquired, developed, converted, and syndicated over 2 million square feet of self-storage nationwide with the help of my incredible team at selfstorageinvesting.com, who has helped thousands of people achieve greatness in self-storage. George, welcome to the show.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Well, good to see you again, and glad that we are able to catch up this time so that, well, I can share a little bit more about you and what you're doing with the folks out there in self-storage podcast land. So, George, I gave everybody a brief introduction as to who you are, what you've done a bit in the industry, but why don't you kind of fill in the gaps and tell your story on how you got into self-storage and a little bit about what you're doing recently.
Yeah, great. Be happy to. So, yeah, I've been in the business a little under 10 years. I guess I got into this business originally. So actually, I have a film degree from Northwestern. And so, nothing to do with real estate or self-storage. And that was my career for about 25 years. I was a visual effects artist in the TV and film world. And what happened was in my late 20s, when I was kind of getting, my budding career going, I lived in Chicago for a while, and then I moved out to Los Angeles and was living out there and finding work. And, I had this cool job. I really enjoyed it. It was great. It was a neat career. A lot of very intense, though, very intense. A lot of like really hard deadlines and like crazy hours. And, you're in your 20s and your 30s, you got all this energy to do this job and it's no problem. But I remember when I was maybe like 27, 28, I'm looking around and I don't see anybody at my company or any of my clients. There's like nobody over 45, 50 years old. And I thought to myself, I better like be thinking about my future and probably smarter to be thinking about my future, sooner rather than later. And as I mentioned, it was crazy hours doing the job that I was doing. A lot of times, I remember at one point, I think I went 2.5, 3 months without a day off, and I would have, it wasn't uncommon to have 36, 48-hour long days at work when you're really pushing for a deadline. It was intense. So the good news is I was making decent money and I had saved up a little pot of cash. And my folks had always had a vacation rental down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So I grew up in Kentucky. I grew up in Hazard, Kentucky, and we would spend all of our summers down in Myrtle Beach. And my dad had bought this condo when I was a kid. And that condo, whenever we weren't using it for the family, we did a vacation rental on it. And, it helped supplement the family income, helped pay for part of my college. So that always stuck with me. And I thought to myself, okay, I need to get into real estate. Like everybody says, buy, and do it young. So I went out and I found like the best deal ever, which was a pre-construction condo in Myrtle Beach. And they threw up a sign that said, coming soon, 3-bedroom oceanfront condos. And all I had to do was put down a deposit, which I did. And 2 years later, the building they finished constructing it, and I closed at the price that was locked in when I put down the deposit 2 years earlier. And when I closed on it, it was immediately worth like twice what I just, paid. It was the best deal of all time. So literally, like I took a mortgage out for X amount of money and I could turn around and sell it for twice that amount. So it was great. And so I did. I thought to myself, this deal is too good. Like, I don't know how long, we both got back from Vegas for the ISS show recently, right? Like, quit while you're ahead. That's what you learn. Get out while you're ahead. I also was living in California and I thought, it's going to be too difficult to manage a vacation rental from that far away. So I took the money and I moved it into a multifamily building in Venice, California. And because that's what I knew to do. I had a buddy who was doing the landlord thing. And I thought, okay, I'll buy some apartments and maybe I'll live in one of them because I was renting at the time. And so I never ended up living in this particular building, but I started my career as a mom and pop landlord. This was around the year 2000. So I continued to do that. And I, learned a lot about that industry, learned how to, borrow against the property because I had a fair amount of equity in it, and continued to buy more property, more apartments and multifamily kind of stuff whenever I had the opportunity over the next, 10 years or so, and began to build myself a little bit of a portfolio. But what I found out was that I had kind of bought myself a job. Everything that I owned was doing fine. It was breaking even. I wasn't in the red, and I was seeing great appreciation. If I wanted to go sell, I was looking, this is Southern California. So things were just skyrocketing, and I was, house rich, but cash poor. And I was renting to a lot of folks who were calling me to do things like change light bulbs. And, I mean, I never will forget, there was one day that like one of the girls who I was renting to couldn't get her garage door down. And I'm just like, pull the red thing under the garage door track and it'll come down. And she couldn't figure that out. And then I asked her to clear off the electric eyes because that's always what the problem is when garage doors won't close, right? She couldn't figure that out. And so finally, I make the trek over there in LA traffic and, clean off the little eyes and boom, garage door comes right down. But, it was just constantly things like that. And as I mentioned, I was cash flow positive, but barely. Whatever I was making, I was putting back into the properties. But I knew that eventually I could cash out and do pretty well. And I had a brother-in-law, my late brother-in-law, who was married to my sister, who they lived in North Carolina. He was a commercial real estate professional. He worked for a developer who built strip malls and college housing. And Chris was a really, he's an entrepreneur, a really aggressive guy. And he was telling me, George, you need to get out of those apartments, get rid of those apartments and get into self-storage. And I had never thought about self-storage before. This was probably 2006, 2007, somewhere in there. And so he was telling me, I never will forget. He's, it's the best income to expense ratio in the business. It's where you want to be right now. And let's do something. So I thought, cool, I would love to do something with my brother-in-law. Well, sadly, he passed away suddenly, completely unexpectedly. And so those plans didn't materialize, but it always stuck in my head. And then shortly thereafter, 2008 hit, 2009, the Great Recession, and of course the bank stopped lending. I weathered the storm okay because I had some good properties, and like I said, everything was cash flowing okay for me. I was in a good debt position. I didn't have problems. I had to evict a couple of tenants, which was a pain in the butt, massive pain in the butt. But at the end of the day, I had a good job as well. So my job continued. I had that good, solid W-2 income coming in every month. So I did okay on my apartments. But as soon as the dust settled, the whole idea of self-storage always stuck in my head. And as I became, at this point, I had probably been doing my career, between 15 to 20 years, and I was beginning to get kind of burned out. And I was creeping closer into my 40s, and I was thinking, it's time to do something different. I also very much wanted to get out of the rat race of LA. I enjoyed living down there, but ultimately, I grew up in Hazard, Kentucky. It's a town of 5,000 people. I was a fish out of water the whole time I lived down there. I'm adaptable fish, but I was still a fish out of water. And so, and I love the outdoors. I love nature. I had two young kids and I wanted to spend more time with them and not work these crazy hours. So I thought to myself, how can I turn this great equity position that I have into more of a cash flow position? And I had self-storage in my mind and I started getting on Google and looking around. And that's actually when I found you. So I attended one of your academies. I believe it was 2013, I want to say. And so I went, it was in Indianapolis at the Holiday Inn near the airport, I remember. And it was great. Like it was just an absolute fantastic experience for me. I remember going back to my hotel room at night and getting on the phone to my wife and just telling her, oh my gosh, like the opportunities that are here for us, like we can live the life that we've always dreamed of through this business. Like I really believe that. I know it's going to be hard work, but we can do this. And so I came out of that academy completely motivated and excited about getting to know this business. And so took a lot of the things that I learned there, a lot of the advice that I got from you and your organization and went for it, so I became a student of the business. I attended ISS in Vegas. I went to, SSA shows, the Self Storage Association. I went to that in Vegas as well as some of the local state shows, started talking to as many folks as I could and learning about the business. And eventually it got to the point where I was ready to do this. And I decided to sell. I had one particularly valuable apartment building, the one that I owned the longest, which was a block off of Abbot Kinney Boulevard in Venice, California. And, Abbot Kinney is like this really well-known street. Rolling Stone magazine called it the coolest street in America back at one point around that time. And so the real estate down there was just insanely valuable. And I had seen this apartment building just go up in value like crazy. But like I said, I still wasn't making any money on it. I was doing okay, but I wasn't supplementing my income. But I went ahead and sold it and took that money. And I was able to buy my first self-storage property, which I still own. And I mentioned I'm from Kentucky. So this was a broker deal. It came across my desk in Pikeville, Kentucky. about an hour from where I grew up. I knew this area well. And my whole business philosophy, my business plan, especially for my first property, was to buy a larger property that made sense for third party management because I still had my career. I very much wanted to rely on that career. I wasn't sure where self storage would take me, but I wasn't ready to give up my career yet. And I knew that I had this demanding career. I didn't have time to manage storage. I was already juggling a lot of things with young kids as well. So I didn't really want to do the day to day. So I hired a management company to run this for me. We definitely had some bumps in the road in the beginning. It took me a while. I didn't know what I didn't know, even though I had learned a ton, but there's nothing like getting into the business and getting your feet wet. And you learn so much. Now the wealth of experience that I have is like immeasurable, right? But back in those days, I knew enough to get out of the way of the management company, who was a pretty well known player in the business. And they had a lot of stores all around the Southeast and the Midwest. So I got out of their way. They made some decisions with personnel that I wasn't thrilled with in the beginning, but I kind of let them do their thing. I didn't speak up probably as much as I should have, but eventually we got it sorted out and figured out. And like I said, I still own that property. We've expanded it. The revenues have literally doubled. I mean, we just finished up as we're recording this. It's early May, and I just looked at my April numbers, and every month they are double of what they were when I purchased this property, 8 years ago, I think it was. And so, this property has just continued to do fantastic. And it was part of the 1031 exchange. And, as I'm sure you've been through these, like, they're not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of stress involved. As a matter of fact, the interesting story about this property is that there was a lot of issues with the land from the previous owner. The previous owner did not do a survey. I, of course, learned through the academy and all my research that you always want to do a survey before you buy any property. And I did. And when I did the survey, it turned out they didn't have clear title to a lot of the 6 acres that this property sat on. And so when we pointed that out, they had to deal with that before I could close and before the bank would lend the money. And I literally closed. You have 6 months to close the 1031. We literally closed at 179 out of the 180 days. We had 1 day left to close. Otherwise, I was looking at like this gigantic tax bill. So I lost a lot of sleep on that. But you know what? It was totally worth it. And so since that time, I continued in my career, worked on this property, but continued in my film and visual effects career, working on this property on the side, doing kind of quarterly property visits and, and learning more and more about the business and looking for more deals, working the program, looking for more deals. And eventually found some, and eventually got to the point where I was, cash flowing well enough to completely replace the income that I was making before in visual effects and film. So I made the decision in 2018 to quit my job, my job, and get rid of my W-2 income. And we moved up to a small town kind of outside of Lake Tahoe, much smaller than we were in LA. We are in a much better situation for me, I think. And now I'm pretty much, a self-storage professional at this point. We own 4 properties right now. We are in the Southeast, mainly Louisiana and Kentucky. So I still continue to live in California, but my business model is that I do still use third-party management to run all of my properties, even the smaller ones. As a matter of fact, I have some properties that are unmanned, and we've been able to partner with different management companies. Not all of them want to do unmanned, but or most of them are moving in that direction. But we've been able to partner with some management companies that work in that business model. And we've also I've been working with an investor, and we've been going through and finding distressed properties, particularly, like the properties that no one else wants. Like the last one that we purchased about a year ago was just infested with drug addicts and homeless people, to be quite honest. It was just a really poorly neglected property that they weren't paying much attention to. The previous owner was just asleep at the wheel when it came to this specific property. So we came in and cleaned that up, and we've got that under contract right now to sell. And that's the kind of thing that we're doing. We are looking for properties that nobody else wants, that we believe still have a lot of potential to make money. And we're coming in and repositioning those and then flipping them once we get them leased up and all in a much better financial place. And in addition to that, I'm continuing to be a buy and hold investor for larger properties that I can have on-site management and third-party management. because those are kind of my bread and butter in terms of like my monthly cash flow. And then because I don't have enough on my plate, I've become a mentor for you, and I also have an IT consulting business. So yeah, I don't know. I thought I was going to like retire up to Tahoe and just like live these days of leisure, but it turned out that you know what, like I like working and I like being busy. So that's just me. But the great thing is, if I wanted to quit the other things that I'm doing and just rely on the storage and spend my days traveling or hanging out with family, I could totally do that. And I do have an incredible amount of flexibility now in my life because of this business. And for that, I'm eternally thankful. Yeah. So that's pretty much my story.
Well, George, thanks for sharing. And indeed, that's the reasons why we like this business is you can go out and make it happen. And here you are after four facilities, and you literally, as you said, you could pretty much call the shots. Your schedule is yours now, and removing yourself from corporate America and many of the chains that come with that. I'm sure that resonates with many folks, and that's my story as well. And George, let's if you would talk a little bit about the first facility that you bought, and this happens for so many of our students and the folks that you work with. Obviously it takes a while. You have to kiss a lot of frogs. You look at a lot of facilities that meet until you find the one that meets your buy box. And in some cases, it just takes a while because not everybody knows exactly what their buy box is and where they're going to own and what feels comfortable and the direction they're going to take. But then typically when that first one, after you've gone through that process, after you close on your first facility and get it transitioned and turned around and it's cash flowing, then the second, the third, and the fourth come pretty short, time frame after that. So, describe that. Once you got through your first facility, you had a better understanding of, what felt comfortable to you, what you liked and what you didn't like, and then talk about the speed and the difference between the first and the second property that you bought.
Yeah. So what I found, so the first property actually, I had done letter writing campaigns to the markets that I was interested in, and got some feedback, but wasn't having a whole lot of luck, to be honest. And I pounded the pavement for a long time, and just kept at it, kept at it. The biggest thing I could probably tell people is, just be persistent. Don't let anything stop you. And I had that attitude. And of course, I was continuing to look at broker deals the entire time. Now, eventually I just sort of threw caution to the wind in some regards, and I sold this apartment building that I mentioned previously with the intention to do a 1031 exchange, but also knowing that I might not find the right property. So with the 1031, I began that process very early on. As soon as I made the decision to sell that property, well before I had a buyer, the apartment building, I'd been looking for properties for months, but I also began reaching out to brokers and just telling them like, look, I'm going to have some 1031 money really soon. Find me some properties, send things to me. Like I'm a serious buyer. I am ready to go. And so what happened was there were a lot of properties that came across my desk that did not make a lot of sense. They were in markets that were very competitive to buy. And I guess it was apropos a little bit, but a deal came across my desk that was the property that I purchased in Pikeville, Kentucky, which is an economically depressed area. If anybody knows anything about Eastern Kentucky, I grew up an hour from there. So I come from three generations of coal miners. My dad, my brother, my grandfather, his father. And so, if anybody knows anything about Eastern Kentucky, the bottom's dropped out of the coal business. So the whole area has sort of suffered. But Pikeville's this little town that has actually weathered the storm pretty well because there's a university there as well as a large medical center. And I think this property scared some investors off. It did not scare me off. And when I saw it, it had a great cap rate, even for a broker deal. And when I looked at it, I realized that the current ownership was not doing a lot of the things that they should be doing in terms of revenue, different revenue centers, and that there was definitely some meat on the bones on this property. So we moved forward and we did pretty well with that. And so that's kind of how I found that deal. With subsequent to that, so once I got into the business, so I've met all these people through my various contacts with the Kentucky SSA, with the national SSA. Now I know all these brokers. Now I'm an actual storage owner. So all these brokers are coming to me. All these people want to talk to me because they know I'm someone who's real and serious. And in addition to that, I'm making contacts because I'm a member of the local chamber of commerce. I'm also I've got connections actually with your organization, and so what I found was that all this networking led me to my next properties. So I actually started I was looking for more properties in Kentucky. I was looking for something nearby that made sense for me. Kentucky really worked out great because it was only, like I said, it was apropos. It was really a coincidence that I ended up with my first property an hour from where I grew up, where I still have a ton of family. So I go back there all the time anyway. So it made sense for that. It just was like a match made in heaven. And I continued to look around, thinking in that area, thinking that I could find other properties and expand my portfolio that way. Well, what happened was I was talking to an owner, who I had met through networking, and he said, I got a buddy down in Louisiana who is got a property he's selling. Because this is a guy that I know, Tommy, and I called him up. I'm like, Tommy, I need more properties. I've been sending out letters and calling everybody I know. Like, I'm looking right now because I had some cash. I came into some more cash, and I wanted to do something else. And Tommy, this particular guy, Tommy, was in the car business, and he said, I got some buddies who are down in Louisiana that I met at auctions, doing car auctions, and they're looking to offload their storage, and you should give them a call. So I called him, and it turned out we got along great. This relationship, as most, is all about relation. I mean, this business is most, it's all about relationships. And so I got along fantastic with these guys that own this property. I had never been to the town where it was located, but flew down there, met him in person, saw the property, beautiful property, and made him an offer. Made him an offer really on the spot, and said, "This is what I think it's worth." I'd analyzed the financials. I had seen the P&Ls and the marketing or the management summary reports and whatnot before I got down there, of course, and I kind of knew what I was looking at. So made him an offer, and we went back home and negotiated and came back, and I closed on that, and then yeah, and then every other property that I've had that I've purchased since then has really come through that networking. Not to discount letter writing, because that's been helpful for me as well. I've met a lot of owners through writing letters and just reaching out, and those connections have been invaluable to me. So for me, it's all about networking, and it's like now, like I go to, we just got back from ISS in Vegas. I know a lot of the folks there. It's always good to to keep those relationships active and alive, because yeah, just like you said, once you get into this business, it's like any other business where the next thing you know, you are meeting a ton of people, and that's where the opportunity comes from. And that's certainly what happened to me, and what I hope will continue to happen for me.
Yeah, it well, as they say, it's not what you know, it is who you know. And just recently received, finally got the book, Who Not How, by Dan Sullivan. It's been recommended by several folks, and I continue to recognize that if we let a Rolodex and our network do the heavy lifting for us, life and business is so much easier instead of trying to figure it all out on our own or learn everything. There are folks that are much better at things than we are and certainly than I am at many things. And it's just up to us to find those people to add to our organization, or the vendors to create a relationship with. So, George, you've been through this path with a number of our students. Tell us, if you would, from the folks that you've gone on to make successful in the business, from the time they started working with you until the time they exited with their first facility. What would you say maybe are some of the key things that you would recommend that people just hone in on if they're going to attempt to go out and do this on their own? Maybe some pitfalls to avoid, or some of the secrets to success that you've seen from some of the folks that you've mentored and helped to become self-storage entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I believe probably the biggest thing is just a razor focus on what you want to do, and not taking no for an answer. I think a lot of people know that self-storage is kind of a tough business to crack into now, because it's such a great business. It's funny, I meet people all the time, and they're, what do you do? Oh, I work in self-storage. I own a few properties. And everybody, people that don't know anything about it are like, that must be a great business. Yeah, it is a great business. It's an awesome business to be in. But the secret's out. It's not the year 2000 anymore. Even when I got into it, I never will forget. I went to the SSA national show, and meeting one of the brokers there, he told me, he's like, man, you're too late. You should have got in this 2, 3, 5 years ago. And very discouraging, telling me I wasn't going to find what I was looking for. And I think you'll hear a lot of people say that now, because it is very competitive. I mean, like I said, again, we just came back from ISS, and it was a well-attended show. It was as big as I had ever seen that show. And so you have to come in with realistic expectations, knowing that there's a lot of people out there that want to get into this business, and having confidence in yourself and having that razor focused and patience to go forward and say, you know what, like I got something that 95% of the rest of these people don't. I'm going to do this. I'm going to absolutely pound the pavement and do this because I want this. You have to want it. And, with my students who really want it, they have been successful. They've done really well. With if you're not willing to put in the hard work, I think that's the major thing. Like it is hard work, like everything else in life that's good, everything else in life that is, that's fruitful. You got to work really hard for it, and this is no exception. And just getting out there and being a student of the industry and meeting as many people as you can, if you do that, then you can get into this business and you'll educate yourself and figure out what's a good deal, figure out what's a bad deal, figure out how to negotiate. And what I found especially is that so much of the time it's a relationship. So somebody might, they might think they can sell their property for X amount of dollars, some insane amount of dollars that no one, no reasonable buyer would come in and pay that because they can't make any money. But if you come in and you tell a seller that, you talk to a seller in clear terms, because they're entrepreneurs as well, right? Like they get it. And you come in and you say, look, I'm a serious buyer. I'm going to close this. I want to pay this amount of money. And here's the reason I want to pay this amount of money, because this is how I'm going to make money. I'm not going to get myself into a bad deal. Then I think you'll find most sellers are very reasonable, and it really is all about those relationships. So going to hark on the relationships.
Yeah, no, agree 100%. And that is, in the beginning when I started in the business, going to the shows, 2005, there wasn't an organization like ours. There wasn't anybody that was out there teaching, coaching, mentoring, or an education platform to learn about the business. And so it was, networking with folks that were in the business and just asking them the questions, how did you get into the business? What do you like best about self-storage? What don't you like about self-storage now that you're in it? And then having to take some lumps by learning it on your own. And yes, science and history and experience has shown that it is experience that a lot that teaches you those lessons. But my gosh, if you can find some other folks to come alongside of you, in the network and build those relationships, as you mentioned, George, that it does shorten the learning curve. It allows you to avoid some of those mistakes if you're willing to listen to them and not learn it on your own. That allows you to get into the business a little bit faster, and then also to again avoid some of those dings, because sometimes, I mean, you lose the battle, sometimes you lose the war. Some of these mistakes that we've seen investors make, that it sunk them before they even really got out of the gate or reached their full potential. And not to scare anyone, but at the end of the day, I think the going as a lone wolf, or as the African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. Go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we've seen that, and that's why we built the community that we built. I certainly didn't have to and don't have to continue doing what we do to help business, but we are building a community with mentors like yourself, George, as you know and have seen, that is going out there, and we're finding the deals, and we're sharing within the community and sharing deals, resources, doing partnerships and joint ventures. And that truly is what is making the difference. And thankful now to see that we're truly hitting our stride and bearing the fruits of that. So, George, I appreciate everything that you do to make our students successful. And you don't have to do that. I know that's your way of giving back. And folks, we do pay our mentors. I don't want you to think that we don't pay George and our other mentors, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have to. And I just appreciate many of the folks that have worked with you have gone on to do some great things. And it's just neat to go out to the ISS show, as you know, and it's rewarding to see, your kids are all grown up. The people you help to get into the business now, they're off building empires and portfolios on their own as well. So just appreciate you and your tireless efforts to help those folks that are looking to get into the business.
Yeah, well, I do this, like you said, yeah, and I don't work for you for the money. I do it because I love this business and I love talking about this business, and it's fun, and the connections are great too. I mean, it is a fantastic organization that you've created. I have a world of respect for you and the organization, and so when I had the opportunity to become a mentor, I said sure. I want to be a part of that because it's a great organization, but it's great to network. It's another opportunity for me to meet more more people in this business. And again, I love the business. I like to talk. I love to talk shop. I love to talk storage. And so, I really enjoy my time with my students because, we can talk about storage all day long and they're as into it as I am, and it's fun.
Well, it was so refreshing to come over to this business, like yourself, George, from single family, multifamily, where I came from, where everybody was so competitive. It was so competitive, and nobody really wanted to share because they were giving away their trade secrets. But in self storage, and I think this is pretty much unilaterally, you'll most investors you'll talk to, you can walk up to saddle up to anybody at the ISS show or even people in your own market at your local SSA show, and you can share 90 to 95% of what you're doing in your business without giving away any trade secrets. Everybody keeps maybe 5% close to their to their vest, but the rest of it is all fair game because we're only dominating a 5 mile radius. And if you happen to have a competitor that you're talking to in that market, chances are you're referring clients back to one another. When you can't fulfill a client's needs for a 10 by 10, you send them over to your competitor and they'll send them back to you. It's a refreshing industry that has a lot of friendly competitors in it. Not everybody, but most of the folks are that way. Is that what you found?
I couldn't agree more, Scott. That's exactly the way I feel. And just coming back from ISS, it's like I talked to so many people and got so many ideas, and even they even have like unique events there. Like I think their roundtable event is really cool, where they do, I don't know, 30 roundtables, and everybody just takes a 10-minute turn at each table, or as many tables as they want to, for those of you who have never been to ISS before. And you're talking to people who are doing really interesting things that I never even thought of, and they don't need to share that information with me. I'll give a quick example, like for unmanned facilities, a guy was showing us how he's got a remote controlled drone that he can use for monitoring his facility. So not only does he have cameras there, because I've got unmanned facilities, and so not only, usually you just rely on your cameras, and if your cameras don't cover everything, then you don't know what's going on. He's got a drone that sits on a roof that he paid money for, and he can control it from his computer and fly that thing anywhere on his property. And if there's a door open or a problem, he can look at it right there and then call his boots on the ground. So he doesn't have to call his boots on the ground first. I was like, wow, how ingenious and how cool. But there were, countless similar stories of people sharing things at ISS who I talked to. And I do love that about the business. Just in my experience, everybody's really cool. That's the way I would say it. Just it's been a very open business, and I've really enjoyed getting to know the people that I do.
I would agree. Well, George, as we near the end of our time here, thanks so much once again for sharing. If you would, for Self Storage Nation, would you share perhaps what is probably the number one thing that you think is people should focus on for success in 2022 as you look at the market and the landscape right now? What would be the top thing that you think self storage investors should be looking at to win in 2022?
Gosh, okay, so let me think. That's a little bit of a tough one. I think we have to kind of keep on what the Fed's doing with the rates. And what I'm really hoping is, even though we know that interest rates are going to go up, but that'll push cap rates up as well. And hopefully that gives the buyers a little bit more leverage and makes it a little bit more of a buyer's market. We will see, but that's probably the main thing I would keep my eye on is the lending markets and how I think that, there's going to be a lot of changes in 2022. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yep. Well, real estate is finance. And so we're always looking at our cost of capital. That dictates a whole lot of things. Timing of the market, timing of when we buy, timing of when we sell, and overall structure of our capital stack. So we are absolutely looking at all of those things. Well, George, once again, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate all that you do for our students and for sharing a little more of your time here on the podcast. So until we meet again, take care.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Pleasure being here.
All right. Thanks, George. Bye now. Hey, gang, wait 3 things before you leave. First, don't forget to subscribe to the Self Storage Podcast and turn on your notifications so you never miss another episode. And while you're there, please leave us a 5-star review if you like the show. Second, be sure to share your favorite episodes and more via Instagram, and don't forget to tag us. And lastly, head to the links in the show description and hit the follow and subscribe button on Twitter and Facebook to get a front row seat as we grow and scale our business and bring you along with us. Take care.